So again, I am Colonel Nikki Harris, Indo-PACOM Information Operations Division Chief. We are going to discuss winning without fighting. So this panel aims to explore how we can leverage communication, trust, and community engagements to deter conflict and build resilience, particularly here in Guam. The Indo-Pacific region faces complex challenges, and our ability to maintain peace and stability relies not only on military strength, but also on the power of communication, trust, and shared understanding, which is more important today than ever before. Guam, as a strategic hub in the Indo-Pacific, plays a vital role in this effort. Its people, its culture, and its location make it both a key asset and a potential target for malign influence. The insights and perspectives that we've heard throughout the day and that we'll hear on this panel are invaluable as we explore how to build a resilient community capable of withstanding and countering malign influence campaigns. Now I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel of experts. Each brings a unique and valuable perspective to this discussion. First, we have Rear Admiral Joshua Lasky, Commander of Joint Task Force Micronesia. Admiral Lasky, with his extensive experience in naval special warfare, brings critical insight into the operational realities of defending this region. Next, we have Rear Admiral Brett Mayetas, Commander of Joint Region Marianas, and a naval flight officer with a distinguished career, including numerous deployments with maritime patrol and reconnaissance squadrons in the Pacific, and extensive experience in the Pentagon, where he served in key leadership positions and roles for the Chief of Naval Operations and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Joining us as well is Colonel Christopher Weary, who you heard earlier today. He's Deputy Director of Plans and Posture at U.S. Indo-PACOM, among other hats he wears. Colonel Weary's background as a strategist at all echelons with service around the globe gives him a broad perspective on the challenges we face. Joining us as well is Colonel Keolani Bailey, Director of Air National Guard Forces for Pacific Air Forces. Colonel Bailey's deep understanding of the Air National Guard's role in the Pacific and his civilian expertise in civil engineering provides invaluable perspective as well. And finally, we have Colonel Edmund Guy, goes by Trey, Deputy Director for Requirements and Resources at Indo-PACOM. Colonel Guy's experience in air defense artillery, combined with his recent studies at the Army War College, provides a vital perspective on resource allocation and strategic needs. So thank you all for being here and for sharing your insights. We'll get started with Admiral Lasky, sir. I have some tailored questions for each of you. As Commander of JTF Micronesia, you're on the front lines of defending Guam. How can we leverage narrative and strategic communication to deter potential adversaries and reinforce our commitment to regional stability, specifically highlighting Guam's importance?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, let me just talk about the important relationship between actions and words. I think sometimes when we talk about strategic communications, when we talk about narrative, especially in a regional context or a global context, it tends to feel a little abstract, and including words like deterrence. But as human beings, we all understand them. We just get lost a little bit, I think, sometimes in the conversation. I suspect if I asked the audience to raise their hands and asked anybody if they've been a child before, almost all would raise their hands. And I think just about any child learns early on the relationship between narrative and action. You'll probably had a parent tell you not to do something, and then you probably did it. And then those words were probably followed up with an action, and maybe not the first iteration of that, but eventually, after some iteration, you were deterred from that behavior at some point. And I think, as you move up to a regional or global context, that doesn't necessarily change. So we've had a lot of discussion today about actions, and I think a lot of that's in the context of readiness. And there's a lot of really, really good work going on around the region, around Micronesia, to improve our readiness for what we know is a threat that's out there. And those actions have to be followed up with the narrative, with words. The problem with actions alone is they are either not observed or they can be misinterpreted. So words that accompany actions help ensure that those actions are received in context and the audience understands the intent of the actions. And the other way around, as I was just talking about with the example that we've all lived, words without actions sometimes lack credibility. I think one thing I would just like to thank the governor, lieutenant governor, and the entire governor of Guam for this event and for all of the cooperation along the way, because I think that in and of itself is a tremendous narrative, the cooperation between the military component of the Guam community here and the government. But I'll just leave it there and pass it on.
Okay, thank you, sir. I have a follow-up question for you. Admiral,
I won't leave it there. I'll answer a follow-up question.
Yes, sir. Given JTF's role, JTF Micronesia's role, how do you see the balance between traditional military deterrence and strategic communications and preventing conflict in the region?
Yeah. Thank you. I got ahead of it a little bit, but that really is. Again, as we move our way up, we tend to talk about these two things, deterrence action, strategic communications. But they are, at least in my view, all component parts of one single operation. Again, the importance of pairing action with words, so actions are understood, and words with actions, so words have credibility. It's not necessarily something to be balanced. It's something that has to come together as parts of a whole. I think for us at Joint Task Force Micronesia, if we've got one role, it really is to look across Micronesia and look for gaps and seams in our current readiness, which, by the way, is not a bad thing. We find problems that, you can hear in some of the discussion today that we as human beings have a little bit of a negative emotional reaction to the highlighting of problems. But I think it doesn't need to be that way. We should have a positive emotional reaction to the highlighting of problems. It's an opportunity to fix something that we know is wrong, which is much better than not knowing something is a problem. So our role, I think, is to look for those gaps and seams, and our role, I think, is to work with the broader community, all of the military components here on Guam, and all of the service components under Indo-PACOM to help shore up gaps and seams throughout Micronesia. Again, so our actions match our words and our words match our actions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This next question is for Colonel Weary. So, Chris, you gave a posture briefing earlier today, and you addressed threats. So, given the increasing sophistication of information operations, influence, malign influence, and things of that nature, in your experience on the Joint Staff and within Indo-Pacific strategy, what do you see as the most significant threats to public trust and social cohesion in Guam and the broader Indo-Pacific region? And how have these threats evolved in recent years?
Yeah, so thanks, Nikki. So I would start by saying the most acute threat, I think, and I think most of us would agree, is the distributed and deliberate and distributed spread of misleading or false information through mass means, which generally comes in the form of the World Wide Web, through various social media, platforms and applications, and then through these bots that are, spreading and fomenting, the misleading information. And why do I say that's the most destructive or, acute threat? And I'll tell it through story. So in 2002, I found myself on the ground in Afghanistan as part of the kind of initial package dealing with the Taliban threat. In 2003, I find myself in Iraq and the U.S.-led invasion to dispose of Saddam Hussein. And then I found myself after the invasion in Baghdad, staring at a sheikh in a local meeting as we try to reestablish governance. And it actually kind of worked. I mean, there's always, two sides to the story, and maybe there's some lying and angling, but ultimately, the local populace at that point was not heavily influenced by the World Wide Web, by access to disinformation. They saw what they saw on the street, they saw what my soldiers do on the street, and they communicated that to me as the leadership of that region. I had my intelligence and my perspective and was able to communicate back. And in that way, we had some form of discourse that allowed us to move, portfolios forward for the better. Nothing ever being perfect. That was at the low-level tactical before the, growth of mass, ability to influence peoples at the lower level of society globally. Fast forward to years later when I was working for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, and the Russians were massing on the border with Ukraine, and he's staring at all of us in the National Military Command Center saying, how many civilian casualties are going to be? What is this going to be? What is this going to be? What is this going to be? And we're trying to give him our best answers, but at that point, the World Wide Web, had the ability to foment what it wanted to foment globally into all levels of society. And that made his job exponentially more harder with more resources to bear on the problem than I had, 23 years earlier in central Baghdad with less resources. I had greater ability to influence and communicate with my counterpart at the local governance level to move, the progress forward than the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States of America did, with all national resources at hand. Here we are in, later in the 21st century. And so I offer those two stories to highlight truly why this business of being very critical with information and being very informed about how you use that information to support your overall engagement at echelon within your system is important. Just some of the things I jotted down, just thinking about it, it's dangerous. It undermines public confidence in governance. It incites social divisions. It influences public opinion on key issues, probably incorrectly many times. Narratives to sow distrust and question legitimacy, both the local governance, national governments, and military leadership. Falsely portrays military activities. Narratives to target environmental concerns from military exercises, which may or may not be true. Alleged treatment of foreign workers to our favor over local populations and so forth. You know, it can fuel ethnic divide in the local population. There's so many negative things that can be instantly popped off by this deliberate distribution in the information environment that I don't have an answer. I mean, Nikki's got the hard job working in the information world all day, every day. I just get to admire from the sidelines and tell her how bad it's getting and then ask her for solutions. But, you know, if that answers the questions, I hope it does. But, you know, we must all be very mature about the information environment. We must all understand that not everything you read or see or are being told is necessarily even grounded in any semblance of the truth. Or maybe it is very truthful, but the timing of it is posited to you at a time when it is set to set up some kind of emotional response to sway something like an election, a decision, or other you know, resourcing kind of activity. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. I'm going to shift the question to Colonel Bailey
Yes, ma'am.
to get the Guard perspective. So the panel description mentions training and empowerment of village leaders, media, and community trusted voices, quote unquote. Given your experience with the Air National Guard and its community ties, what actionable steps can be taken to empower local leaders and trusted voices to effectively counter misinformation and promote resilience within their communities?
Okay, thank you.
Easy question.
So, number one, I'm grateful to be here and grateful for the governor, lieutenant governor, and General Cruz, and everyone that's been a part of organizing this and making it happen. And I applaud the people of Guam who are engaged in this critical effort. So if I were to ask this room, if you're here, if you are from Guam and you are here, how many of you have a member of your family that serves in the Guam National Guard? The number that I'm given is 80% of the people of Guam have a direct relative that serves in the National Guard. So that is significant. That is a significant tie and a significant capability that the people of Guam bring to the defense of Guam and the defense of our nation. And the other key factor with that and those critical relationships is that the Guam Guard, National Guard, is a key enabler and a key capability to fight against disinformation. Because as cancerous and as terrible as disinformation is and the social media and the impact that is, the antidote is relationships. It's people. And it's those trusted relationships that the National Guard can leverage to help combat that. And there's 3 actionable things that, from my experience and recommendation, would be that the Guard, the National Guard, can play a critical way forward to winning without fighting. Number 1 is in how we exercise and how we train. The Admiral talked about work. It's gonna take work. So we exercise and we train consistently and regularly to respond to national defense activities, hurricanes, typhoons, all kinds of different events. We need to incorporate combating disinformation and the communication impacts into those exercises and training events. And the Guard plays a key role in that. Secondary, communication. And the best communication is human to human, brother to sister to family member communication. And the Guard relationships build those connections and those communications that then create trust. And as we learned earlier, we can operate then at the speed of trust. And then the last piece is really getting after how do we educate and develop the children of Guam, the people of Guam, to be prepared for these threats, to be prepared and to understand how the information environment is going to try to influence them. And one of the ways we do that through the Guam National Guard is we have family programs, we have lots of educational opportunities, and we aim to develop the people of Guam, create those opportunities, those jobs with the National Guard that then promote education, development, and increased opportunities for the people of Guam. And that is our center of gravity. That is what we're striving to protect, defend, and that's how we win, is by engaging the people of Guam.
Excellent answer. Thank you so much for that response. I'm going to move on to Colonel Guy. So you have a background in resource allocation and strategic planning. What specific strategies or maybe approaches can the government of Guam employ, from your perspective, to foster civil unity and social cohesion, particularly during periods of heightened tension or crisis? Another easy question.
Thanks, Nikki, for the question, and I appreciate it. You say I have a background in resources, but reading over my bio, you'll understand that about 16 months ago, I barely knew what my directorate did. So I look at this and say, based on my experience over the first 20 years of my career, I'm an air and missile defender, and I'm a short-range air and missile defender at a time when the country didn't need short-range air defenders. We had to learn a new craft on almost a yearly basis, whether in the CENTCOM area of operations or in training back home and in developing our soldiers in the Army to do something else. And so I look at that resource allocation aspect of what we do is I have a team of experts in the J8, in the Directorate for Resources and Requirements. I have a team of experts. PhDs are all over the place. People that understand resource allocation and how to build the budget are all over the place, and understanding how to deal with Congress, understanding how to really put the things that we need, not for necessarily for this year, not for next year, but for the out years, the multiple years out, and say, this is something that is a capability, an effect that we need in 3, 4, 5 years, maybe even further, and how we put that in. And so that, what I would say is, through the engagements that Colonel Bailey was talking about, through the engagements with the Guam community that the team up here today has been talking about, is make those resources known to the commanders here on the ground. Because if we can make those resources known and we say, hey, this is a capability that we as the community of Guam think that we need, those are things that we can put into our integrated priority list that we send up. Those are things that we can put into our independent assessment to Congress to say, hey, we think we should be funded for X or X plus whatever because of the needs that are out there. And those are the things that we can put together in the J8 through the commands coming up. And so JTFM, Joint Regions Marianas, all of those things, they come up and they come to us and they say, here are our priorities. And we look at what Admiral Paparo says the number one operational priority is. And he said it this morning, it's here. And so if we say it's a requirement for here and the commands bring it up, it will go on the list. And so that's what I would say for the resource allocation. Barely 16 months into the job, understanding what I do is the team of experts that we have will make sure that those things are put forward.
All right, thank you. Okay, for Admiral Baetis. I have a question for you as well. And this is thinking in consideration of our allies and partners within the region. And it's been emphasized throughout the day that strong relationships are extremely important. And everything we do at Indo-PACOM is in consideration of our allies and partners and working together as much as possible. So when we say deterrence, it's not just us. We recognize that it's bigger than just us. The question is, how can Guam strengthen its partnerships with other Pacific Island nations to counter disinformation from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. I think that for us, when I think first about allies and partners is the simple truth that we cannot go it alone. And the reason is that it's about our way of life. It's about freedom and democracy. And so when we're defending America, we're defending these ideas, and these ideas matter to more people than just us. And so allies and partners are part of our broad coalition of building the world that we want to build. And so for Guam, what I think Guam can do is one thing it does all the time, and I've learned about it here. Guam, the harbor, is the third busiest port in the U.S. Navy, which is interesting because there's not a lot of ships that are permanently stationed there. And the reason that it's so busy is because of the exercises, because of the allies and the partners that come into Guam and have the opportunity to operate in and around Guam, the Marianas. This space is unique because it allows nations to come together and do two things. One, and which is really important and foundational, is to just build long-term relationships. We've talked, all of us have had opportunities to work for senior leaders. I had no idea that so much of the connective tissue in our world is because military leaders sometimes meet each other as captains and lieutenants, or they go to school together, or they participate in an exercise together. And then when things go bad, they have those relationships to draw on to be able to bring unity of effort to any problem. And then the second thing that these exercises allow us to do is just practice. Doing the things that we do, whether it's on the sea, below the sea, on the ground, in the air, you got to practice that stuff. And practicing with just your country is hard, and practicing with your allies and partners is harder, but if you don't do it, you won't be ready. And then the third thing I think is important are events like Guam Defense Forum. It's just bringing people in, visits that I know the governor and the government does with other like-minded countries to understand where we have similar problems, can develop similar solutions so that we can move our way of life forward just a little bit more. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I have a final question, and this one I'll open up to the entire panel, so anyone can answer, all one of you, however you want to take it. How can Guam leverage, and this is again going back to regional partnerships, but how can Guam leverage its unique position to foster regional partnerships? And I feel like you answered a lot of that already, in the realm of information operations and strategic communication. And then I have a follow-up question as well, if anybody else wants to address that.
So I would just give a brief answer on that, which is don't do what the United States Army does, for example. So when we partner many times with...
I've often said the same thing.
I was setting you up, sir. Perfect. We'll get partnered with someone and we'll jump right to the most advanced military operation possible as the seed corn of what our interoperability is going to be about. So I'll give you an example. There I am, Iraq again, and I'm trying to teach this guy combined arms maneuver at the brigade level, which is 7,500 soldiers acting in unison, conducting multiple forms of direct fire combat, integrating indirect fires from artillery and missiles with aviation support, all infused with intelligence feeds and advanced command and control capability. And I'm looking at, and this guy's looking at me like, are you kidding me? I can't even get my guys to load their rifle. And so we do that, and we do it over and over. And so coming back to this ally and partner, or how do you work with partners? How do you lead in that sphere? It's find something that is you can share that is important to both, that you can iterate on and move, to use an American football analogy, the ball forward on the field. It could be something as simple as, cyber defense of the banking system, or hardening of, the money machines to get money out in both countries, because that's a shared problem that you realize you both have. And that just, once you can start getting the easy wins, then you can start advancing to the Super Bowl game, which unfortunately is how we start with it many times when we partner with someone. And so that's how I would ask you to look at it is, of course we all want to figure out how to completely harden the overall society from all forms of attack at all times, right? But is that really how you start, or do you start with one aspect of that, unpack it, establish a framework, establish a plan of action to go forward, share resources, and come to some kind of policy, shared policy that advances the ball, and then you move on to the next thing, and then you couple a couple together, and a couple months later, a year later, you actually have fomented some kind of, true outcome that has improved your situation in both nations' cases. And so that's what I offer on that one.
And maybe just, I'm sorry. Just quickly to add, pivoting off something that Brett said earlier about partnership. You don't have to be here long to see that Guam is a place where partnership comes together. I don't quite know the timeline, but it's really just been a few weeks, and I think in that time I've seen the Australians, the Japanese, the Taiwans, the Koreans that have all come through Guam. And in addition to that, we've had the opportunity to watch the governor work, and Guam is clearly a leader in the region as well. So it doesn't take long being here to see how important Guam is to the region overall, how important Guam is to us, and what a fortune we have to have the opportunity to be here and part of the community.
I would just, a message to my fellow brothers and sisters in arms, in the profession of arms, is General Cruz shared with me a story where he was out with my boss, General Schneider, at one of the other islands, and there was a military organization that was doing agile combat employment activities, and they were engaged in these activities, and General Schneider looked over to General Cruz and he said, is that really gonna work? And General Cruz was kind of like, we've been living here for hundreds and thousands of years, and we know how to survive in this environment. We know how to survive on these islands. So the takeaway for me is for General Schneider and for as General Cruz shared that story, is one of the things that we can do is recognize the cultural competencies that the Guard brings, the experience in the theater, the experience in the seas and the oceans and the environment, and capitalize on that. Capitalize on that experience, capitalize on those relationships, and make sure that we recognize it, we appreciate it, and we involve those key partners in the work that we're doing. And it facilitates it increases that speed of trust, and it saves us some lesson learned. We can get to our objectives quite often much faster if we rely on the experience of the people that have lived here and fought here and bled here in the defense of this island.
All right. Any other?
Yeah, just one other opportunity maybe for us all is just for Guam and this group of people to be an example. It's interesting, the first time I got a chance to lead a certain size of folks, all the way up to being behind the scenes and more like high-level decisions and high-level communications that I ever wanted to be a part of. And sometimes when I would get feedback, whether it be at the unit level or at the all-Navy level, I would listen to people and I would say, well, what do you think? And they would say, and they would connect facts and come to a conclusion. And I was like, I completely understand how you got there. That's not how we got there. and then would look forward to the opportunity to just tell them, this is what we did, this is why we did it. And so, again, what you think is completely valid, but let me try to connect the dots for you a little bit. And I would just encourage, to leverage what Josh said, talk about words and actions. As you see words and actions, if it doesn't make sense where you are, our public affairs team, Michelle's getting nervous as I look at her, they're great. And if the message doesn't make sense, or you think that there's some nefarious intent behind it, then give us the opportunity and to correct the record, to complete things. It's interesting for me, again, knowing what the source of something is, and then watching where it goes for all the right reasons sometimes, but just understand that the ultimate, if we don't step in, the conclusion's not going to be exactly accurate. And so all we want truly is just the best facts possible to get out, to provide the best understanding that we can to build that trust. And ideally, the people here in Guam provide that example for all of our allies and partners.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I do want to thank all of our panelists for those very insightful comments and discussions. We are going to move on and open the floor up for some Q&A. Again, this is the Winning Without Fighting panel, so keep those questions relevant to the topic at hand. I see someone queued up right here. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Colonel Harris. And again, thank you for all those who are participating. My name is Senator Telo Taitigui. I'm the Oversight Chair of Military Buildup, but I'm also the Oversight Chair of Technology. So I'd like to thank you, Colonel Harris, for your comments that you made on the last panel. And we have a AI task force that I'm hoping you will accept our invitation to sit on this task force to discuss further on your what you brought to the forefront. As we know, the question I have basically is almost what you were talking about earlier, and that is in the region. So there is quite some concern about that. So what is the Department of War's response to the initiative and projects China has undertaken with the Pacific Island nations? These initiative ranges from infrastructure, development, maritime resources, extraction, trade with islands such as FSM, Kiribati, Papua New Guinea, and Fiji, with China seeking to build a closer community ties with this Pacific Island nations. What impact did this have on China's power and influence in the Indo-Pacific, and how might that impact Guam's security if we're looking at ways without fighting and providing a more secure island of Guam? We are surrounded by islands that are taking things from China.
Okay, so from a campaigning perspective, Senator, a couple of things I could offer to you. The People's Republic is certainly our strategic competitor, and they are and have made some progress in certain countries throughout the region. They also tried this, by the way, in Africa as part of their Belt and Road Initiative, and had some initial successes. But what history has shown is eventually it comes to an ending that the host nation realizes they made a bad agreement in the first place. So to answer your question, what are we doing? We're highlighting some of those African failures or very specific friction points from the Belt and Road Initiative through the Middle East and Africa, and exposing that to the Oceania countries. That's number one. Number two, we have pretty significant energy to connect private equity from Manhattan and from other nations, specifically Australia, to critical infrastructure, strategic infrastructure, and AI infrastructure type needs that could be populated throughout the Oceania countries. That is pushing the Chinese out, because what we are finding is many of these countries would rather partner with U.S. private equity than with Chinese, because they realize when you couple it with the outcomes that have happened in other places of the world, the outcome with us, meaning the U.S. or the Western world, is generally a better outcome for the long run. And then number three is just through simple exposure to some of these governments of what this will mean in the out months and years if you sign a contract with the Chinese. Let them get them used to their port, whatever it may be. That they're going to come, calling to collect when you default and can't pay. And that alone, in many cases, are pushing some of these countries back towards, okay, well, I believe you, but what can you do for us, and how fast can you do it? The real challenge for the United States and our, kind of Western democracy partners is we just can't move as fast with capital for these countries as they would want. And then we have to have investors that accept that there may be a minimal return on investment or even no return on investment initially until it has that in the out months and years. That is the challenge, but I would not say we are negligent. I would say Admiral Paparo, if he was here, he could describe it with more eloquence. His engagements with Manhattan and the various private equity firms. I've been with him for some of those engagements. And I'm talking at the top end, BlackRock, Goldman, the list goes on of like big money that we're talking about. And so that is a line of effort that Indo-Pacific Command is helping to connect monies that come out of other places than the US government and other governments.
Thank you. Anyone else on the panel like to tackle that one?
I won't tackle it differently, but I'll just support through personal experience in Africa and South America, and that there's a long trail of stories of regret for accepting PRC money, and you are already seeing some of those examples in some of the Pacific Islands as well. Large structures built quickly and then only to be abandoned later and amounting to what is essentially a burden on the economy afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Cherney. I'm with the Wall Street Journal. Just kind of a broad question. The U.S. military is expanding here in Guam. The Marines are coming. There's the submarine base upgrades, some upgrades to Anderson and the missile defense system. Tying all that together, do you think those investments do increase deterrence in the region, winning without fighting, or does it somehow do the opposite? Just keen to get people's take on the overall trend.
In my view, they do increase deterrence. Deterrence is a funny thing. I talked about a little bit earlier in my comments. What makes deterrence tricky is day to day, it can be awfully hard to see when deterrence is working. Because sometimes it only appears as the absence of an aggressive action by an aggressor. But we do have cases. We have cases in history where we can pin deterrent actions and show that they deterred an attack. It's certainly at the tactical level. For those of us that have experience, we've seen it. It was, Chris brought up Iraq and Afghanistan. It was commonplace in Afghanistan for a while to use what we called shows of force, which were simply to take a strike aircraft, bring it in low and loud, and make sure that the adversary knew that we had overwhelming force nearby. And at least my personal experience is that worked just every single time. So when we saw a threat emerge and we were able to demonstrate credible, overwhelming force, it deterred the aggressor. Like I said, just every single time. But again, what's harder to see is when deterrence is working in the background. And in my view, we know deterrence worked just every morning when we wake up. And it's not a, the name of the panel is Winning Without Fighting. The reality is, win, the word win implies some end state at some point. But when you're applying readiness readiness is not something with an end. We don't wake up one day and say, we're done building readiness. We wake up every day and we look for the next place where we can shore up a potential weak spot. And we just go at it consistently every day. And we know that deterrence is working every day when we wake up and an act of aggression didn't occur. And sometimes we have a clearer sense through other means that the deterrence is working. But by and large, we know throughout history, and we can kind of see the reverse case. There are a number of cases that throughout history where maybe it's hard to see when deterrence worked, but it can be easier to see where deterrence failed. And the commonality between events throughout history where deterrence failed was a lack of readiness, a lack of credible force available to deter the aggressor.
Yeah, and to build on Josh's answer, the very specific where the investments are going. We've talked about this in other moments today, but we're trying to complicate things for our adversary to make it harder, not easier, for them to be able to project power into Guam through the second island chain and into Hawaii. So when you look at the specific investments, they're really well thought out. You want to be able to take off and land from more than one runway, more than 2 runways, more than 3 runways. So the work that we're doing in Tinian, the work that we're doing in the Northwest Field, means that aircraft, as they're getting ready to come back from a combat mission or go out for another mission, have more opportunities to land, rearm, refuel, and get back into the fight. Polaris Point is right now, we need our submarine tenders there to do intermediate maintenance on our submarines. Polaris Point will allow us to have the capability there so that those submarine tenders can go out in the rest of the theater and to be able to do intermediate maintenance on our submarines. Guam Defense System is the absolute necessity for protecting all of this. So each one of the investments as they go through are specifically targeted to make sure that we're making things much harder for China or any potential adversary.
And the one
Thank
thing
you.
that
Go ahead.
one thing that I'll add here is, from the resource perspective, it's making sure those things are linked to the strategy. And so, where commander is coming from, where Admiral Paro comes from and says, this is the direction that we're taking this, and he hasn't deviated too far from, where Admiral Aquilino took it, and, previous commanders, as you heard earlier, from Chris, and strategy-wise there in the posture, is making sure those resources are linked and making sure there's a tangible timeline of when those resources are going to be delivered, so we can say, all right, this is what we need by 27, but that doesn't mean we're done. The foxhole is never complete. And so it's, you always make constant improvements to your battle position. And we're not trying to say this is, the only battle position. It is one of, and we are trying to look here in the second island chain to help us project power and with the support of our allies and partners. But it's what are the resources that we need to be able to do that for 27, for 30, for 35, and going from there. And
with deterrence, we talked about it's the capability, it's the communication, the words that match that, and then the will to act, the will to show that capability in action. And we've talked a lot about a whole of government, but really it's a whole of nation, because these projects, what they do is they not only bring the readiness and lethality capability to the nation, but they bring jobs, they bring opportunities and other benefits to the local communities, and that provide that whole of nation deterrence that is really needed when our adversaries look at the problem set.
Winning without fighting, that's a subjective, kind of outcome if we want to have that discussion. But I'm seeing indicators that more people agree with how we should be deterring the monolith, to the west. And how can I say that with evidence? So because I'm the posture chief, I get to travel around this entire part of the world. And I've pretty much been to every country island, in the Indo-PACOM AOR. Many times I'll come out of the Ministry of Defense of that nation, or I'll show up for meetings there, and I'll see another country there leaving from their meeting. and I'll ask to the host nation, I'll say, hey, why are the Canadians here? What are they doing? Or whoever, just pick another country. And they'll say, oh yeah, they're trying to establish a status of forces agreement with us because they have interest in rotating forces down to this part of the world because of their, whatever, shrimp industry or whatever it is. And this is not a one-off example. I could write down several examples across the region where I've seen other nations looking for a visiting force agreement, a status of forces agreement, some kind of economic deal, some kind of increased bilateral exercise. In many cases, some of them are wanting to do trilateral or multilateral exercising and or working groups to get after a shared problem set that they all share. And that is not being fomented by a person like me saying, hey, Canada, you should go really do that. That's them, those nations acting on their own enterprise, going to do those things because they understand truly what's at risk concerning if there was to be no deterrence and some kind of regionalized or larger conflict with the People's Republic of China.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Okay, it looks like that's the last question, so I'll go ahead and close this out.
There's one more, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
You didn't see me, that's
All right, last question. Go ahead.
Hi, Tim Puzan, Colonel retired, working for the Department of Military Affairs for Guam, supporting Guam National Guard. KO, this one's for you, so heads up. So the Guam National Guard and the National Guard Bureau has a program called the State Partnership Program. And it's where states actually partner with another nation to support and push forward the levers of power that we build by relationships on the military and the civil side. So for Guam, so how Guam is influencing outside the island itself is a partnership with the Philippines as well as with Palau now recently. So KO, I'm hoping you got this. I wonder if you could maybe talk about the SPP program and how that supports another lever of power that perhaps a lot of people aren't aware of.
Thank you, sir. I didn't pay him to ask that, but I'm glad you did. Really, I was in Balikatan in the Philippines earlier this year, and I saw the Guam National Guardsmen doing great work there, along with the Hawaii National Guard and a number of other key partners. But what the state partnership brings is those relationships across the Indo-Pacific and the relationships that people working together as they're young NCOs, young lieutenants, all the way up throughout their career, and building that trust, because trust takes time, and those key relationships. Then in time of crisis, the nation can draw upon those relationships, those capabilities, and the training and the work that has been put in to then respond to whatever disaster or whatever crisis is at hand. So that is a key enabler that I know Indo-PACOM commander and the leadership is well versed. In fact, the Admiral will be meeting with all the tags, General Cruz included, to discuss SPP later this week. So it's a key enabler, and appreciate the question.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll go ahead and close it out. First of all, I'm going to ask for some audience participation, and please give this panel a round of applause. Really appreciate it. So we've had a very productive and enlightening discussion. Maybe a more accurate description of this panel or name for it would be winning by delaying the fight for as long as we possibly can, pushing it to the right. I want to highlight a few things that I heard from the panel that I just want to reiterate for the audience. So our words must match our actions, so it's important for our credibility and holding us accountable. The role of the military is important as we shore up gaps, especially our military components, et cetera, in the region. A major threat is the mass dissemination of misinformation and false information and it's global at this point. It's not just regional, it's not just Guam, it's not just the US, et cetera. It's everywhere. And so an acknowledgement of that and the negative impact that it has and making ourselves more resilient to it. The familial and interfamilial ties and interconnectedness of the military and the population of Guam, and acknowledging that. Relationships, particularly with our allies and partners, and the importance of making sure those are strong, and that an acknowledgement that we are not, whether it's the fight or countering misinformation and disinformation, this is not a unilateral activity for us. It involves a lot more than just the U.S. Trust, again, that's part of our credibility. Education, building resilience with the populations again. Guam as a center of gravity and acknowledging that. Practice how we fight. So those rehearsals and those exercises are extremely important. Forums to create dialogue are extremely important, like the Guam Defense Forum. And then we capitalize on our experience and relationships. And that goes back to involving our allies and partners and making sure they understand the value that they bring to these efforts. So again, I want to thank everyone for your attention for this panel, and thank our panel members for your great insights today, and for the audience members for your questions.
I have one thing I want to.
Go ahead, sir. I'll give you the final word.
I love the United States Army. I just wanted to correct the record.
What was that, sir?
We'll see what he says in
That was disinformation
December.
earlier. That was
All right. Thank you, everyone.